Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to kick off our presentation today. The title of our talk is Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. On this first slide, you'll see the main theme we're exploring. Over the next few minutes, we'll look at how education was used as a tool for shaping national identity and, unfortunately, for imposing certain ideas of civilization on others. So, let's dive in and see how these concepts played out historically. Let's take a closer look at the contents of this presentation. We start with the introduction, which sets the stage for understanding how education has evolved and been perceived. Moving on, we explore the English Education Act of 1835, a significant milestone in shaping colonial education policies. Next, we consider how the British saw education, often viewing it through a colonial lens that influenced their policies. We then examine the grave errors committed by the East, or Anglicists, whose approach sometimes overlooked local needs and contexts. Thomas Babington Macaulay's role is also crucial here, as his ideas heavily influenced the education system, emphasizing Western knowledge. Following that, we look at how the British saw education, what their goals and perceptions were, and how those shaped the curriculum and teaching methods. Then, we discuss education for commerce, highlighted by Wood's Dispatch of 1854, which aimed to promote vocational and practical education aligned with economic needs. Moving further, we examine the agenda for a national education, emphasizing the importance of creating an inclusive system that serves the entire nation. We also hear from Mahatma Gandhi, who famously critiqued English education for having enslaved us, highlighting the need for an education rooted in our own culture and values. We then turn to the local school, emphasizing the importance of community-based education and its role in fostering local identity. We also explore Tagore, Abode of Peace, a vision for education that promotes harmony and holistic development. Finally, we look at the new routines and rules introduced to modernize education, reflecting changing societal needs. Throughout this overview, the overall theme is understanding how education has been shaped by colonial influences, local needs, and ideas of national identity, all of which continue to influence us today. So, in this part of our story, we see how the East India Company expanded its control across the entire country. It wasn't just about gaining territory or collecting revenues. There was also a deeper, cultural aspect to their mission. The British in India believed they had a responsibility to civilize the native populations. They thought it was their duty to change local customs and values, often viewing their own culture as superior. This idea of civilizing the natives became a key part of their overall approach, shaping how they governed and interacted with Indian society. It's important to understand this mindset because it explains some of the policies and attitudes that influenced British rule during this period. On this slide, we're looking at how the British viewed education in India through the lens of Orientalism. Starting back in 1783, William Jones, a noted linguist, was appointed as a junior judge at the Supreme Court established by the company. But what's really interesting is that he began studying ancient Indian texts, delving into areas like law, philosophy, religion, politics, morality, arithmetic, medicine, and many other sciences. This effort was part of a broader fascination with India's rich heritage. You see, Englishmen like Henry Thomas Colebrook and Nathaniel Hald were also deeply involved in uncovering and understanding India's ancient past. They worked on mastering Indian languages and translating Sanskrit and Persian works into English, making these texts accessible to the wider world. Additionally, institutions were set up to promote this study. For example, in Calcutta, a madrasa was established in 1781 to focus on Arabic, Persian, and Islamic law, showing an interest in religious and legal traditions. Then, in 1791, the Hindu College was founded in Benares. This college aimed to encourage the study of Sanskrit texts, which were seen as essential for understanding and possibly administrating the country. So overall, these efforts reflect how the British viewed Indian knowledge, not just as cultural artifacts, but as sources of valuable information that could inform their own understanding and governance of India. This approach is a clear example of Orientalism, where the East was studied through a Western lens, often with a sense of discovery and sometimes condescension. Let's take a closer look at some of the grave errors made by the East and Anglicists in their approach. Firstly, their understanding of the East was often filled with inaccuracies and unscientific ideas. Instead of genuinely understanding the local cultures and knowledge systems, there was a tendency to hold onto misconceptions. One of the key mistakes was their strategy in education. They believed that the British efforts shouldn't be about simply teaching what the natives wanted or what they already respected. The goal wasn't to just win their favor or to be liked. Instead, they thought that by introducing scientific and technological advances from the West, they could truly uplift the people. This approach also included the idea that teaching English was a way to civilize the population. They believed that through learning English, the people's tastes, values, and even their culture could be transformed. Overall, these errors highlight a misguided belief that Western knowledge and language alone could bring about genuine progress, ignoring the rich indigenous traditions and the importance of understanding local contexts. This slide reminds us of the importance of a respectful and nuanced approach when engaging with different cultures and knowledge systems. Let's look at Thomas Babington Macaulay and his views on education in India. He believed that India was an uncivilized country that needed to be civilized through education. Macaulay famously argued that a single good European library was worth more than the entire native literature of India and Arabia. This highlights his belief that Western knowledge and literature were superior and essential for progress. He thought that teaching English would open up access to some of the world's finest literature and keep Indians informed about Western science and philosophy. Essentially, he saw the teaching of English as a way to civilize people, changing their tastes, values, and culture. This perspective was encapsulated in what is known as Macaulay's Minute, which summarized his approach to European education in India. It's a clear example of how colonial ideas about education were used to shape the development of Indian society during that period. Let's talk about the English Education Act of 1835. This was a significant moment because its main goal was to establish English as the primary language for higher education. The idea was to create a unified system that could modernize education and foster better communication with Britain. At the same time, the act aimed to curb the influence of traditional Oriental institutions like the Calcutta Madrasa and Banaras Sanskrit College. These institutions were seen by the British as temples of darkness, which reflects the colonial mindset that viewed indigenous educational methods as outdated or inferior. The British wanted to replace or diminish their influence to promote Western-style education. To support this shift, English textbooks were produced specifically for schools, making it easier for students to learn in the new language. Overall, this act is a key step in understanding how colonial policies sought to reshape Indian education, aligning it more closely with Western models, and, in the process, impacting the cultural and intellectual landscape of the time. Let's talk about education for commerce, focusing on Wood's Dispatch of 1854. This was a significant moment in the history of educational reform in India. The dispatch emphasized the importance of establishing a system of education that would support the economic development of the country. It recommended the creation of a university system, inspired by the British model, to promote higher education and technical skills. One of the key points was the encouragement of vernacular languages in education, which aimed to make learning more accessible to the common people. This was crucial because it recognized the importance of local languages in empowering the masses and fostering economic growth. The dispatch also highlighted the need for a broad curriculum, combining traditional knowledge with modern sciences, to produce skilled professionals who could contribute to commerce and industry. Overall, Wood's dispatch laid the foundation for a more organized and pragmatic approach to education in India, aligning it closely with the country's economic needs and the broader goal of development. It's a pivotal moment that connects education directly with commerce and progress. In the 1830s, William Adam, a Scottish missionary, traveled through Bengal and Bihar to observe the local education system. He was asked by the company to report on how education was progressing in vernacular schools, or what they called pathshalas. What he found was quite fascinating. The system was remarkably flexible and informal. There were no fixed fees, no printed books, no dedicated school buildings, and no standard furniture like benches or chairs. There were no blackboards, no separate classes, no roll call registers, no annual exams, and no fixed timetable. Fees were based on what parents could afford, so wealthier families paid more. Classes often took place outdoors under a banyan tree, or in a corner of a village shop, a temple, or even at the guru's home. Teaching was primarily oral, with the guru deciding what to teach based on the student's needs. Interestingly, the guru would interact with different groups of children at different levels of learning, tailoring the instruction accordingly. All of this highlights a very adaptable, community-centered approach to education, which connects to our broader theme of understanding diverse educational practices across history. After 1854, the company decided it was time to make the vernacular education system more organized and disciplined. They introduced clear routines and established rules to create a more structured learning environment. To ensure these rules were followed, they also set up regular inspections. One key change was the appointment of government pandits, who were responsible for overseeing 4 to 5 schools each. This helped maintain quality and consistency across the system. Teaching methods shifted to rely on textbooks, and students' progress was now to be evaluated through annual examinations. There was also a financial aspect. Students had to pay a regular fee, attend classes consistently, sit on fixed seats, and follow new discipline rules. Schools that agreed to these new regulations received government support in the form of grants. It's important to note some of the consequences of these changes. Students were expected to attend school even during harvest time, which was a busy period for many families. Missing school was now seen as a sign of indiscipline and indicated a lack of interest in learning. Overall, these reforms aimed to create a more standardized, disciplined, and accountable education system, aligning it with broader efforts to modernize and control education under the new rules. Now, let's look at the agenda for a national education. Some Indians, observing the rapid development in Europe, believed that Western education could be a powerful tool to modernize India. As a result, huge amounts of capital were invested in expanding educational infrastructure. More schools, colleges, and universities were established to spread this new knowledge. However, it's important to note that not everyone welcomed this approach. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore reacted strongly against Western education because they felt it sometimes undermined Indian culture and values. This tension reflects a broader struggle, balancing the desire for progress with preserving our unique identity. Understanding this debate helps us see how education became a central part of India's national movement and identity formation. Let's take a moment to reflect on what Mahatma Gandhi believed about colonial education. He argued that it created a sense of inferiority among Indians, making them feel less capable and less proud of their own culture. He described this form of education as sinful and as casting an evil spell that enslaved the mind. Gandhi was deeply concerned about how this system destroyed our pride and our heritage. He advocated for an education that would restore our dignity and self-respect. Specifically, he emphasized the importance of Indian languages as the medium of instruction, believing that language is a powerful tool to develop both the mind and the soul. Gandhi criticized Western education for focusing too much on reading and writing, rather than fostering oral knowledge and practical skills. He saw textbooks as more valued than real-world experience, which, in his view, was a flawed approach. Overall, Gandhi's ideas challenge us to think about the true purpose of education, not just to produce literate individuals, but to nurture pride, identity, and practical wisdom rooted in our own culture. This perspective aligns with the broader theme of reclaiming our identity and redefining progress on our own terms. Let's take a closer look at Tagore's Abode of Peace. Rabindranath Tagore founded Shantiniketan in 1901 with a vision to create a different kind of school. As a child, He actually hated going to school because he described it as a prison. He felt that in traditional schools, children couldn't truly do what they wanted or explore their own interests. He believed that childhood should be a time of self-learning, where children are happy, free, and creative. His idea was to build a school environment that fosters exploration and personal growth. That's why he emphasized the importance of teaching not just arts and music, but also science and technology to create a balanced education. Most importantly, Tagore thought that creative learning could only thrive in a natural setting, so he set up Shantiniketon about 100 kilometers away from Calcutta, in a rural area. He saw this place as an abode of peace, a harmony with nature where children could nurture their natural creativity and learn freely. This idea of blending nature, freedom, and holistic education really ties into the broader theme of nurturing human potential in harmony with the environment.